Hello, this is Cho of the Shiny Colors Discord, and welcome to another episode of the Shiny Review. Today we're going to be talking about the latest banner featuring limited P-SSR4 Mamimi, as well as limited S-SSR4 Chiyuki. And we'll talk about the event SSR3 Amana. First off, Mamimi. Antika's first SSR4. With her two-toned hair, the latest Mamimi solely dedicates herself to visual, and is a damn good card at it. Boasting AoE visual appeals, utilizing both scaling mechanics that have typically been associated with Antika, Mamimi leaves her unique mark on the meta and team comps. She's the first unit to get plus 300 across all of her uncaps by herself, though you might find yourself starved for SP as per usual when it comes to building stat stick units like this. She also has a slightly cheaper 4-star appeal, only needing 40 SP instead of the usual 50, at the cost of making her 3-star uncap only plus 150 instead of the usual 200. Her roles are Center, Buffer, has AoE attacks, scales on Revenge, as well as Attention Down. So what does she do? Her initial skill is a visual 2.0 appeal that attacks all judges and scales based on how low your mental is. So that means at 1% HP, you will get that visual 2.0. The higher your HP, the lower it is. And it has a secondary attack of a visual 2.5 appeal that again attacks all judges, and the damage is increased based on how low your attention is. So if your attention is at its lowest, it's a 2.5, and anything else is slightly lower than that. The link appeal on the skill is a vocal dance visual buff of 50% for 4 turns. When fully limit broken, this Mamimi gains a visual 2.5 appeal that attacks all judges, again scaling on Revenge, and a secondary visual 4.0 appeal on all judges that scales based on how low your attention is. And the link appeal is buffed to 75% to all 3 stats for 4 turns. As for her passives, at 1 star she gains a visual 30% up as well as defense 30% down debuff if your mental is above 75%, has a 40% chance to activate 1 time. I chose to use defense 30% down this time as mental damage up 30% is a little misleading, so it's much easier to think of it as just reducing your defense. Her 2-star passive is a visual 40% buff as well as attention 30% down as long as you have an attention down buff, has a 30% chance to activate 3 times. Her 3-star uncap is a visual plus 150, as mentioned earlier, and her memory appeal at max is a visual 2.0 that has a link appeal of a visual 4.0, which scales on attention. This kit is super loaded, just to get that out of the way. Having a memory 6 right off the bat, as long as you have a very minute amount of attention down, as we will talk about with attention scaling in just a second, it's really good. Her 1-star passive works for the early game perfectly as it sets you up to be at lower HP in the later rounds where you need to have low HP for your stronger appeals. And then the second you have an attention down buff, you get to pop your visual 40% and go crazy. This card is absolutely ridiculous. Her recommended supports. If I were to ever tell you that one specific SSR is core that isn't Illumination Stars, this would be the unit. Limited Kiriko is a must for this Mamimi, as everything about her kit synergizes with this Mamimi. She has an appeal that reduces your attention, as well as 2 separate buffs that reduce your attention, that have very easy activation requirements for Antika. Visual Antika lacks some of the more decisive supports compared to Dance, cough cough Mamimi, but they can make do as long as you avoid attention-seeking buffs or prioritize those buffs only for the early game. Other supports I recommend include the visual SSR Chiyoko and Sakuya. SSR1 Tenka is actually very useful in this situation, as she includes attention down buffs that are relatively useful, as well as some damage cuts that might prove to be very useful for the team. Fuyuko has a reasonably unconditional visual buff, and of course we have to include the limited Illumination Stars. As for alternatives, I can really only think of, if you don't have limited Kiriko, to use Aquarium Kiriko, and if you don't have Visual Chiyoko, to use the SR from the last banner. At this point I should probably talk about how attention scaling works, so make sure to listen in. Attention scaling has 2 different variations, attention up and attention down. You'll know there are cards like Kaho 3 as well as Chiyoko 3 that scale on attention up. How that works is that the lowest amount of damage you can be at is at 100% attention, which is what every team starts at in every FES. So you need to gain plus 200% somewhere, which is really easy, for Hokago at least. And for attention down, the worst amount of damage can be at 250% attention, and the best amount of damage is at 50% attention. So To think about the Mamimi abilities, all you need to do is reduce your attention by 20% and have her passive activate, and now you are at maximum damage, which is why I think her memory appeal is one of the easiest to set up in the game. For recommended teammates, Visual Antika has gotten a big upgrade in the form of a very consistent leader now. You can make the executive decision to focus more on attention down and buffing, or revenge damage and health reduction. Either are viable and valid. The team I've been seeing the most features Sakuya 2, Yuika 1, Mamimi 3, Kiriko 2, as well as the SR Kogane, otherwise known as Bebop Kogane. Alternatives I've seen ran include Sakuya 1, Yuika 3, Kiriko 3, as well as the SR variations for Kiriko and Sakuya. The reason I've seen Yuika 3 is actually because Yuika 3 synergizes pretty well with Mamimi, and works off of Bebop Kogane, which is a card that is staple here. And because Bebop Kogane has buffs for both dance and visual, it's very valid to run a dual stat set that features these two as your main damage dealers, and utilizing Sakuya and Kiriko as your buffers alongside Kogane. Overall, we have to give this card double S across the board. The strongest and most consistent center for Visual Antika, packing a visual 6 when things work out, which is really easy to do. There's no real downsides to running her as a center, just let him have it. And as a unit, of course, double S. She's a card that leaves an impact at all points in the game, and actively scales based on the situation through her own volition. If you're focused on Visual Antika, it's time to go for broke. Otherwise, this card is AoE and does mad damage. It's your call. Now we have the limited support SSR, Chiyuki. Remember how in the last few talks we've had about Dance Dramaria, one of the sticking points is that they didn't have an ideal support? Well, they got one now. Chiyuki more or less solves any issues one might have with building Dance Dramaria, so take full advantage of all the benefits. It is worth noting that she is an appeal idea for TFD, so if you're looking for more SP setups, this Chiyuki helps out a lot. Her skills are Idol's Bond, which reaches level 10 at 80, Perfect Mastery, which is 1 point lower than Sakura Mochi Master Chiyoko at 5, Unit Mastery SP, which goes up to level 10, Promise Recovery, and Rest Boost. Remember that Unit Mastery means that if you are running her alongside other Alstromeria units, you can earn 10 or 20 additional SP on that job as long as Chiyuki is in the room with other Alstromeria members, and this can include supports or your produce card. As for her passives and skills, at 1 star she unlocks a dance 20% up as well as mental 10% heal as long as your mental is above 80%, has a 10% chance to activate 3 times. At 2 star, this skill gets a direct upgrade in the form of dance 40%, has the same amount of heal, same activation requirements, activation rate, and number of times it can activate. Her 3 star uncap is dance at 100, which because she is a single stat limited SSR, this actually means that she can get 175 by herself, assuming that you get her all the way up to 3 stars. At 4 stars, she gets a dance 2 appeal that attacks all judges and heals you by 5%. And it's also worth noting that this heal uses the memory overflow mechanic that we saw with limited Chiyuki as well as limited Amana, which means that for how much HP you don't heal off of your mental heal, say you're at full, that goes straight into your memory gauge instead. Chiyuki gets a grade of double S if she's on Alstromeria and S otherwise. The second limited Chiyuki knocks it out of the park with her passives and support skills, making her an ideal member of any Alstromeria team that needs to inject dance straight into their veins. It's really nice to see that after 4 cards, Chiyuki finally has a good and usable SSR support. The appeal being AoE is very effective, but the 5% heal isn't super amazing. The overflow can help, but you can leave a mana to that job if you have her. Go for broke if you run Alstromeria, especially if you run dance-focused Alstromeria. Lastly, we'll talk about the event card, Amana. Our first event card from a Collabo Fest, the latest Amana focuses solely on dance to further help out Dance Dramaria. The problem, however, is that Sleepy Amana exists, and is an infinitely better card for that team, and this one struggles just to get up to speed. If you lack any other options, this Amana will work well enough. It is worth noting that her idea in TFD is for mental, so if you need a mental idea for TFD, this Amana can help, as mental is sort of hard to find for dance. The only other card you'll really see is Asahi, so this is a okay addition to your mental lineup. Her skills are Idol's Bond, which reaches a level of 4, pretty average for an event SR, a Dance Mastery Dance level of 5 at max, Promised Recovery, Rest Boost, and Trouble Guard. As for her skills and passives, at 1 star she unlocks a Dance 12% buff if your unit is in the dance position, 30% chance to activate 1 time. 2 stars unlocks a mental damage cut of 15% if it is turn 3 or earlier, 30% chance to activate 1 time. Her uncap is a Dance plus 50, and her appeal is a Dance 2.0 that has a mental damage cut of 20% for 2 turns. Overall, Amana is graded a C. I can't really find a way to justify running this Amana over the initial Amana SR. I mean, initial Amana SR has a better Dance Mastery Dance, has overall better skills, a better appeal, better buffs, just a better card overall. This card is just genuinely on the weaker end, which feels very deflating after the fairly positive review of the last event SR, Natsuha. Her saving grace is that she's the only Amana card currently with a talk/mental idea for TFD, so I really only recommend her for very new players that are still trying to fill out their roster. And with that being said, that's the end of the video. Thank you as always for watching, and if you like what you saw, feel free to leave a like and share it around if you can. If there's anything else you'd like to see in the Shiny review, make sure to leave a comment below, and we'll do our best to incorporate those ideas into future episodes. So, till the next banner, I've been Cho, thanks for watching, and have a wonderful rest of your day.